Playbook for Performance, the official podcast of Shawna Corden, the Joan of Arc for corporate healing and performance. Join the quest to make work fun again by preparing leadership for engaging workplaces. And now, your host.
Hello, and welcome back to another edition of the Playbook for Performance podcast. I'm your host, Shawna Corden, and this month we're talking all about team coaching, and specifically today we're going to be talking about what is team coaching and the safety of teams in team coaching. So all of you have heard the term psychological safety made popular by Dr. Amy Edmondson and her research, and we're going to dive into that a little more deeply today, and just some brand new research from my partner Team Coacher AI about the data that they have with teams and psychological safety and how that's really generated, and the prerequisites to moving from comfortable and producing with high psychological safety to really excelling. So let's dive into it. So you've probably, if you're familiar at all with this, if you've seen her TED Talk, if you haven't, I recommend you just Google Amy Edmondson TED Talk, where she really talks about her research and teams and psychological safety. If you're not familiar, here's a quick diagram that you can see. On the left, you see the axis is psychological safety. And across the bottom, what you see is the axis of accountability. So there can be very collegial, high harmony teams. Everybody gets along, it's great, but they're not doing that great of work. They enjoy their work, but the work isn't really groundbreaking. They're not growing a ton. They're just kind of satisfied. On the other hand, you can have super high accountability, and this is where people are in the anxious zone. They're low on psychological safety, and they're constantly sort of looking over their shoulder. They're wondering, can I perform? Am I in trouble here? What's going on? So you see a lot of this kind of anxious behavior, and really they kind of look at this whole thing of, I'm being challenged, standards are higher, and there's clear expectations, but boy, I'm really struggling here because I'm not comfortable. If you have low psychological safety and low accountability, you're really in this apathy zone. It's like, who cares? I'm just checking in, checking out. If you've heard of quiet quitting, this is where it exists. It's like, I don't feel so safe, so I'm not going to put myself out there. And nobody's holding me accountable. I'm just a warm body occupying a space, collecting a paycheck. Now, the interesting thing about this is in our Team Coacher data, we know that for most teams using our tool, working with team coaching, the teams are about 90% in that upper left quadrant, what we call the comfort zone. So high harmony, but they're not really holding each other accountable. It's more kind of personal standards that really set the tone for performance. We know about 2% of teams are hanging out in this apathy zone. 5% are in the anxious zone. But only 3% are in that upper right corner where we have high accountability and high psychological safety, which Amy calls the learning zone. This is where it's safe to take risks. It's okay where your ideas are not going to be ridiculed. They might be challenged, right? Just because you have high psychological safety doesn't mean that you won't be challenged, but you're being challenged on the merits of the ideas, not your own personal credibility. You're not volleying with verbal personal insults and things like that. This is really about taking risks, pushing yourself, performing to your potential, which is what we're really looking for in teams. And high-performing teams, so if you really look at Pat Lencioni's work in 5 Dysfunctions of a Team and some other work like that, you'll know that the more that we push each other and challenge each other, the better we'll be. And I think of, historic masterminds that included Tesla and Edison and Ford and Andrew Carnegie. I think of people like Warren Buffett and Bill Gates who play bridge together. These groups where they have a high degree of psychological safety, high degree of accountability. This is where they can really push themselves to learn and grow. Exciting place to be. But let's talk a little bit more about this, because you can't just go, well, I'm going to automatically go from comfort to learning zone. I'm just going to hold people accountable. Well, that's not really how it works. And Team Coachers on the forefront of this research. I am super excited to be a partner with them, because when I'm coaching my teams, I can now tell these leaders, if you want to move from performing, comfort to really excelling, being in that learning zone, there are some prerequisites. And we know what those prerequisites are. The first is feedback. We all need regular feedback, and I'll dive more deeply into this in just a moment. Healthy friction. So healthy friction is kind of not ignoring and not insults. It's in between, on the continuum. I'll talk about that more in a moment. And then commitment and meaning. So if you're familiar with Simon Sinek's work, why and what it takes to really be committed to something bigger than yourself, that's where this all needs to take place in order to move from comfort zone to learning zone. So let's dive more deeply into that. So what's the feedback need to be? Well, it needs to be regular. It needs to be specific. It needs to be constructive. So we know that if someone just says, good job, no big deal. We know this from Gallup's Q12 research, that people need very specific feedback, such as, I really like how you worked with that irate customer and got them to calm down, and then the way that you treated them made them a raving fan for life, right? I love that I can always depend on you, because if you commit to something, you follow through. I don't have to worry about it, okay? It could also be, you know what, your content here is great. Everything in here is solid. However, the thing that would make it even better is some more polish. Go over this with a fine-tooth comb. Make sure that you don't have any typos. Take out any little, remnants in your slide deck so that it really looks polished. We want the end result to look just as good as the content behind it. That kind of feedback is super helpful. Now, when we look at the Gallup research, we know that when it comes to what do I get, and it's one of the statements in the survey is, someone has talked to me about my development in the last, I think it's 2 weeks or last month. I've forgotten the time period, but it's recent. It can't be just your yearly evaluation. That evaluation is often, there's too late to do anything about it, right? It could be that the feedback that you're getting is from a long time ago, which is why I am a huge fan of Marshall Goldsmith's Feed Forward plan. And that is basically asking people, what's one thing I could do to be better in this situation? The generic version is, what's one thing that I could do that would improve the relationship between us? But it could be, what is the one thing I could do that would make this podcast better? What is the one thing that I could do to connect with you more? What's the one thing I could talk about that would improve your life on a daily basis? That kind of question is super helpful as well. So let's get back to the feedback piece. So again, make it constructive, make it specific, make it regular, frequent. The second piece here, in terms of the prerequisites to move from that comfortable to really performing at potential, is healthy friction. So I mentioned earlier, it's halfway between this artificial harmony where it's like nice, 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 but inside you're going, "Arr," and personal attacks where people are criticizing you and they are not talking about something relevant. They're talking about your appearance or something like that. So we want to be beyond constructive, which is, well, what if you included this? And if we did this at this timeline, this would be better. And then destructive, which is, well, it's too late for that, and things that are not helpful. We want it to be right in between. It's this challenge. And I've talked about this on the podcast before. I had a client I won't name, in tech, a group of women engineers, and I was really having to work with them and coach them because when they submitted an idea, whether it be code or something like that, they expected their idea to survive fully intact without any changes whatsoever, and that's what they considered success. But really, when you are a good functioning team with a lot of psychological safety, you submit your idea knowing that you're just contributing some of the DNA for the end product. You know, this is going to be a little bit of a Frankenstein product. It's going to have, your code, and it's going to have their marketing, and it's going to have this end result, and it's going to have this timeline that's contributed collectively by the team. And so that's what we're talking about in terms of the challenges are about making the product or the end result better, as opposed to, I'm trying to one-up you by criticizing, your production of things. Okay. So healthy friction is challenging one another, pushing one another to be better, but also being encouraging in that way. So let's talk about commitment. So commitment going both ways. I'm older. When I first began in the workforce, it was probably the tail end of when someone could expect to join a company, work for them their entire career, and retire from that same company. Probably 15 years ago, I think the data showed that generation of employees entering the workforce would expect to have 5 to 7 career changes, not just employer changes, but career changes between the time they entered the workplace and retirement. And along that continuum, employers became less loyal to their employees, and employees repaid that lack of loyalty. So people were taking their institutional knowledge with them, and they were using it to get a jump in the workplace somewhere else, maybe with a competitor. But we really want employees to know that they belong, that the employee is going to take care of them within what is both ethical, reasonable, and the expectation is set appropriately. And we want employees to be devoted. We want them to do their best, take appropriate risks, be challenged, come and put in a good day's work, or from home, wherever it is that they're working from. But they're truly committed, and they're really ethical about how they're delivering. Okay, and then when we talk about meaning, especially for our younger generations, I would say less so for boomers, Gen X, but definitely millennials and below. I think we really see how much more meaning is relevant to them in terms of how does their company perform? Are they connected to the mission of the company? Can they relate? Are they proud of the company they work for? Are they proud of the work they do? Those things are also very important in terms of moving from comfortable to really that high-performing high accountability, high psychological safety quadrant. So, interesting food for thought here when we talk about psychological safety, what it means for teams. And as a leader, knowing that you've got these prerequisites that you've got to fulfill to move your team from this space to this space. So how do you do that? Well, besides this little checklist that we've provided, it's regular dialogue. It's posing open-ended questions that don't have a right or wrong answer, where people practice sharing their feelings, sharing their opinions, and knowing that it's safe to do so. They're not criticized for that, they're appreciated for it, and so on. So it takes some practice and it takes time. A colleague of mine, Doug Floor, talks about you cannot have quality time without quantity time. So as a leader, you want to schedule those one-on-ones. You want to make them a priority and honor them. It's not the first thing to be moved on your calendar when something else comes up. And make sure that you've got an agenda for those meetings. So we'll talk more about those topics as the month goes on, but just want to remind all of you, please subscribe, give us a thumbs up if you're here on YouTube. If you're listening audio, please give us a 5-star, give us a review. It really helps get the message out in the world. We'd love for you to invite your friends, send this recording or this video off to your teammates. Make a suggestion, make a plan. We do offer team coaching. We offer leadership coaching. Sometimes the way this works is I get together with the leader. He's or she's talking about the team, but there's some work for us to do one-on-one first. Help them kind of get their act together, get their message straight, present that to the team, and then often we'll go through that vision, mission, purpose, values, and then the rules of engagement, how the team behaves with one another, how they operate. Sometimes we'll do the DISC assessment along with that. But generally, that can take a 6-month process. And we'll be introducing this super cool tool that I talked about, that where we got this data about the percentages and the prerequisites, the Team Coacher tool, which is an AI tool. It uses pulse surveys to figure out where the team sits right now, how comfortable they are, and engages them in dialogue with prompts. So a great tool. I can't say enough about it. And obviously the insights that we're getting from the tool are even greater. But if you're interested, reach out. You can put a comment in the YouTube comments below. You can email us at Shawna@ShawnaCorden.com or podcast@ShawnaCorden.com. Until next time, please take care. We'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to Playbook for Performance. To learn more about Shawna Corden, her consulting programs and tools, please visit her website at ShawnaCorden.com and follow us on social media at Shawna Corden.